up, everyone? Welcome to yet another interview. I'm sitting here talking to the wonderful Wolf Schröder. Wolf, how you doing, man?
Doing great, man. Glad we finally get to do an interview together.
Yeah, this has been another one that's been a long time coming. It's just stuff kind of kept getting in the way, and work and busy and blah blah blah. You know how it is. So, guys, before we dive into this, thank you again to Esports Heaven. If you're not watching this video on Esports Heaven, then you should go check that out. That's where the timestamps and some added info is going to be. So definitely check out esportsheaven.com for the full Cyan interview experience. I'm feeling pretty under the weather, as maybe you guys can tell. I'm going to use this headset mic so that I can mute myself while Wolf is talking. So that's the reason for the dip in my audio quality today, guys, and I do apologize for that. I just want to let you guys know. So Wolf, let's dive into some full-blown video game esports content. As I was doing my research, for someone as prolific as you are in the esports community, I couldn't actually find that much about you or your beginnings in gaming. So we're going to start with some fluff today. I know you're a big retro game fan. How did you become a gamer?
Well, I remember going over to my friend Christopher's house when I was in kindergarten and going to play on his Nintendo Entertainment System, his NES. This is probably like 1995. Going into his house and playing his dad's version of 1945, which is a great shoot 'em up game, and then ending up playing Super Mario Brothers. And after I played the game for like an hour, every night that my parents let me, I would just ride his bus home and play games all night. All my parents, had their own free time or whatever. So the kids' parents were always annoyed that I was over there all the time, but I got into games that way and got my Nintendo 64 a few years later. It was my first console I owned. My parents got it for me for Christmas, and I lived in a house that wasn't really nearby anybody. It wasn't like I lived in a rural area, but I lived in the edge of the suburbs so far that you couldn't ride a bike to anyone's house. I didn't really have any neighbors, so I kind of grew up in an area where most of my friends that I went to school with, on their time off, they would go play street hockey or ride bicycles or go out in the woods or do things like that. But I was kind of always alone, especially when my sister was really young, too young to like hang out with me and play with me. So I'd take games like Star Fox 64 and just try to beat high scores over and over and over again. I can't tell you how many times I beat Star Fox 64, probably thousands. And I guess that was my like kind of lead in from being a gamer and playing games as a kid into like kind of the competitive edge of gaming. Is just I had no one to play with, and I just wanted to beat myself over and over and over again and improve.
That's pretty interesting. I know I'm a bit of a passive speedrun fan, and I know that for a lot of the speedrunning community, that's how they got involved in speedrunning in the first place, by just, well, I beat this game. What can I do now? I'm gonna beat it faster. Have you ever taken any interest in speedrunning?
I watch a lot of the speedruns that are on Twitch, especially the Super Mario 64 ones. I think those are really fun. And I do every now and then watch people do speedruns of random assorted games. I wouldn't say I'm like a big speedrun guy, but I definitely do respect it a lot and watch it a lot. One of my favorite things to do on Twitch is to scroll down to the bottom, if you're sorting by games, and see like what games don't have a lot of views. And every now and then I'll see like Banjo-Kazooie or I don't know, some Nintendo 64 game I've never heard of, and I click on it and some guy's doing a speedrun, and sure enough he's got like 15 people watching. These guys little splits on the side, and I'm super into that because that guy's not super famous or anything. He's not making it. He's not setting any world records, but he's just like, I like this. I'm doing it, and I got a few people watching me, and I'm like, I want to be one of those people watching.
Before we got into the actual interview, I asked you about your big amiibo wall you got behind you. You mentioned Super Smash Bros. A little bit, and I know that you have a personal interest in Super Smash Bros. On your YouTube channel. You have some VODs from like Korean players playing each other. Were you ever interested in competitive Super Smash Bros?
Smash Bros. Really is like the first game I ever played tournaments of, and I remember the first tournament I won. It was whenever the year Brawl came out. It was the first time I won. I won a Brawl tournament, and I didn't even own a Wii. The game had probably been out for like 6 or 9 months, and everyone was like, "How'd you get so good if you didn't you didn't even have a Wii?" I was like, "Would you guys play Melee?" And they were like, "Well, I mean, kind of, some, a little bit, not really." My brother had a GameCube, and I was like, "Well, all I did for like middle school, like all I did every week and all the time with my friends was play Melee, 1v1, Final Destination, no items. So when the Wii version came out, I played a ton with my friends who had Wiis. I couldn't afford one because I didn't really have a job at the time. I was in high school, so what are you going to do? But I played a lot when I could and went to tournaments. I played some Melee tournaments, but Melee is just like a game that's so hard that even though I really had a lot of fun playing it and I had some decent places in tournaments, never really made money off tournaments and never was like considered a top player in my area. But I've always been a big fan of the Melee scene, especially the reboot that's going on right now. I wouldn't say it's a reboot, but it's big now. It's huge now. It's not just a thing that a lot of people knew about. Now it's a thing that a lot of people know about and a lot of people are watching. But Smash is like the game I've always played offline. It's the game that I play with my friends locally. It's different than like StarCraft or Heroes of the Storm or other games I play online. It's a game that I just sit down and play with friends, and that's what's special about it to me. It's the game I played most growing up by millions of hours. So there's a special place in my heart and also a special place on my shelf. I don't know if you can really see that if my thing focuses where the purple GameCube is. I have like all the versions of Melee up there, a little special setup there. But yeah, the Amiibo collection I have is an idea I have that's not completed yet, where I want to have a big shelf setup where I have every character from the latest version of Smash. If a new one comes out, I'll update it with every Amiibo from every playable character and a physical copy of one of that character's iconic games, because I have a lot of games and hard copies of games on my house. So that's kind of like the long-term plan with the Amiibo collection, but it's hard to get them in Korea. So it's somewhat incomplete, but I'm working on it.
So rolling on from that experience with like casual gaming and some dealings with competitive Smash Bros. Play, how did you get involved with StarCraft specifically, which was your first big foray into esports, as far as I know?
I'd always been a big, I must say Melee. Brood War and Melee are two games that in my mind are so interconnected. When I was playing Brood War a lot, I always really liked to watch the competitive scene, and I knew it was a big thing and a big esport, but I always thought, well, it's too far away. It's Korea. It's not really a thing here. And I would always tell people, over in Korea, there's esports going on. You should check it out. Try to show them some, 420p video on YouTube if I could find something that was that high quality to show them. And I was like, well, that's weird. I always had interest in the game and its esport as soon as I found out about it. And when StarCraft 2 got announced, I got really excited, and it was a long, painful year, several years actually, since its announcement, waiting for the beta. The beta came out, I played it. I want to see if I was good, and I got straight into Platinum. I went 10-0 in my placement matches, because it used to be 10 placement matches back then, and Platinum was the highest, and I was so proud of myself, and I kept playing the game, and I got super into it, and I was still playing Terran back then, and I was like, this game's going to be big. And then there was a tournament that was hosted only on YouTube called the HDH Invitational that HD, a YouTube commentator at the time, and Husky, another commentator who was only doing kind of not live tournaments, because live streaming was so bad back then, but recorded tournaments. These two guys were casting these tournaments. They had big prize monies, and everyone really enjoyed them. I remember watching the commentators and being like, these guys are super into this. I think I could do this. I think I could do it better, and I want to do it live. And so I didn't know how to get into it, and I didn't have any contacts at all. I was just that guy on the ladder, and I'd hit some people, some famous players like In Control or Artosis or whatever, just in the beta, but I didn't really know how to contact them. I thought it'd be weird to message them, so I decided to make a tournament. And I was like, if there's some money, even if there's no money, people just play in it, then I can get casting experience, and some pros will show up because they want to practice or whatever, or if there's a little bit of prize money, because my tournaments had like no money on them, as I was broke and had no real sponsors. Thought maybe some people want to play in this, maybe get some good casting experience, learn more about the pro scene than just what I'm playing on the ladder. So I made a tournament called Open Wolf Cup. Anyone could join. I always had a few reserved slots because it was kind of first come, first serve. But if pro gamers wanted to play, I saved spots for them, so that like if Huck wanted to play, but he was asleep when I posted it, and 64 people signed up within an hour, he didn't wake up and go, I wanted to play. So it was somewhat, I'd say open. There were never any invited players, except champions, which were obviously always allowed back in if they agreed to play. and then slots for pro players, usually about like 6 to 10, depending on how many people were talking to me that day. So I made this tournament. I ran it by myself using like a challenge bracket. I commentated it all by myself and live streamed the entire thing. And it was really fun. And eventually it got bigger, and I hired like mini commentators to cover different parts of the tournament itself. Like a guy called Ip, who was commentating back at the day as well on livestream.com, like I was. Livestream.com was the way back then. It was either you were a live stream guy or you were a Ustream guy. Livestream TV and Ustream TV, and those are the two. And to be honest, Ustream TV was a little bit harder to set up and also needed usually a better PC, and I didn't have a good enough one. So I was on livestream.com with some terrible little program that worked. I had no webcam, just my mic and my computer screen, and started commentating that way. Eventually got invited to do like clan tournaments online for no pay, just to get myself out there. And one of the clan tournaments I did a lot was SGL, which is a lot of North American pro players against each other. It was like an online clan league, which unfortunately stuff like that doesn't really exist anymore in StarCraft 2, but back then it was the best because you had NA players playing against each other regularly, and it was awesome. Big names like Idrin and Control playing them sometimes too. And from then on, I took an interest in the GSL, which was kind of just starting at the time in 2010. And I got invited by GOM TV to move out there when they saw my resume, to move out there and work there at the time, here now, because I'm still in Korea 6 years later. So I got invited by John the Translator, who, if you've been following StarCraft for a long time, that name may mean something to you, people watching. He was the guy who sent me an email. He was like, send me a picture of yourself and a video of yourself because no one knows what you look like. And, no offense, but we can't have like a crazy person or, on the show because we got cameras and stuff. And so I sent him a video, and that was like actually the most nerve-wracking part because I had a good resume for all the online tournaments I've cast and a few offline tournaments I cast as well. I had a massive resume for that. And I was like, what if he just thinks I'm ugly or something? I was really nervous about that. But as it turns out, the video that I sent him was fine. And I went over there right after Kelly Milky's Mole Trap and Doa were three commentators that were trying out at the time. Some of them left. I stayed. I left home. My parents were really worried about it. They were like, oh, what if they screw you over? What if you don't get paid? I'm like, GOM TV is like really famous. The GOM player they have on my computer, like it's a media player. Like GOM TV is a good company. They're not gonna screw me over. And they were like, you're gonna hate it. You'll come back in a few months. You're never gonna have fun out there. No one speaks English, et cetera, et cetera. And then I just never came home. And I've been out here ever since. Obviously, I've traveled back home a few times for vacation or whatnot. I've traveled around the world commentating, but I left the country thinking, I have no idea where this is going to lead me. I don't know how far this is going to go. And I'm still here 6 years later.
That's actually a pretty damn cool story, in my opinion. As a bit of an aside, I couldn't find any VODs from an Open Wolf Cup. Did you have any VODs that I just can't find out there? Like, I found your live stream page, and I was going to ask you, where are the VODs?
So I have some old VODs saved locally on my old computer back at my parents' house. The problem is that last time I went to my parents' house, in fact, last two times, I had a giant computer. It was a terrible computer, but it was huge. But no one can find it. My family can't find it. So I don't know. Those VODs that I had saved locally like lost for time. Maybe in a few years I'll find them and I'll be like, oh, should I upload these? And anyway, on livestream.com itself, at some point they implemented some premium service where you had to pay I want to say $80, and then all your VODs would be stored forever. But if you didn't pay $80, all your VODs would literally be deleted a month later. It's like, oh, we're announcing this. If you don't save your stuff locally or buy this service, then all your stuff is going to get deleted forever. And so I saved the VODs that meant something to me, but I was broke. I was in college, and the rest of them just disappeared forever. I had an old Justin TV channel as well that I don't know if there's VODs on. I haven't even really checked. I doubt it, but maybe there's some VODs on there. But yeah, most of my old casting is all lost to time. So it's kind of sad, but in a lot of ways, honestly, I'm pretty thankful. Some like the other commentators who've worked for a long time in StarCraft out here, like Doa, he has some of his old VODs, and he's like, "Oh man, I watch them sometimes, but it hurts me." Um, we weren't terrible back then, but compared to where we are now, it's not something I really like to look back on. It's like you have to look back with some real rose tinted glasses to enjoy your commentary from 6 years ago.
Well, consider it a personal request from me to you. When you find your old computer, if you ever do, please just upload them on YouTube. That'd be great.
Will do.
So you talk about your family kind of warning you, maybe, don't do this, you're probably going to hate it. What was it like moving to Korea for esports 6 years ago? Was there any like serious culture shock when you first arrived or anything like that?
I remember the first the night before I left, I stayed up all night because I figured that'll be the way. I'll sleep on the plane. That'll be great. As it turns out, I can't sleep on planes even still 6 years later. It was my first time taking an international flight. So I was like, oh, yeah, I'll just pass out on the plane. It'll be great. No, it was a really long flight. And then I got to Seoul and I was greeted by Torch, who was running the GOM house at the time, which is where we had a few pro gamers from around the world. And FX Open, the team that I worked with, was actually living there briefly. So he picked me up from the airport, and I just remember like my eyes were so red and I was so tired. But when I got out of the subway um, station in Mokdong, which is not like the center of Seoul, it's kind of a smaller part. I remember walking outside and being like, "There's cars parked on the sidewalk, and everybody's outside, and everyone's eating outside, and everyone's happy, and there's a bunch of drinking going on, and everyone's just excited." And it's like, "Oh, this is totally different than anything I've ever seen where I'm from." Because I was from Atlanta, and at nighttime you don't even generally want to be outside. So I was like, wow, this seems really cool. I went to bed, and then over the course of the next few weeks, I had a lot of people helping me out. Tasteless helped me out a ton. A programmer living out here called Karn helped me out a lot. Moletrap, Doa, both of those guys taught me what they knew from living there for their very brief stay. Tasteless obviously had lived in Korea for a long time before me. I want to say 4 or 5 years before I got there, so maybe even longer than that. I don't even know, but he's been here forever. So he was really helpful teaching me how to get around. I was nervous to like take the subway because I didn't know where I was going, and the subway system in Atlanta, MARTA, is like very simple and much smaller and much dirtier, honestly. But the Seoul subway system confused me at first because it was massive, but after using it like 2 or 3 times, it became super easy. And then the toughest thing after that, culture-wise, I feel like there weren't that many problems. I had a ton of Korean friends in the States, and I'd eaten a bunch of Korean food before. The problem really was that I didn't speak the language, and that was something that, of course, everyone had moved out to commentate, including Tasis and Artosis, and later on commentators like Monte Cristo, Papa Smithy, is everyone who's ever looked out here, Brendan. When you first move out, you just can't speak the language, and for me, I feel like more than anyone else, that really bothered me. And I made big efforts to learn the language by going on terrible dates, looking up stuff online. Never took an official class, still to this day, never. But I spent a lot of time learning the language, and like kind of overcoming that language barrier was what finally made me feel really comfortable here, is knowing that basically no matter what happens, if I don't know how to say something, I know how to explain it, and I can get out of any common situation. Once that was the case, which took me, I'd say, probably about a year or so, I felt like, okay, I'm settled in here. This can be my home now.
So moving on to a little bit more present events, keeping with StarCraft, SSL has obviously been announced for 2017, and actually qualifiers started today. And your return to SSL has been announced alongside it. They're running tournaments for both Brood War and StarCraft 2, and you'll be casting both of them. So when did you find out about all of this? There was a period of time where there was some expectancy that SSL was not returning at all for StarCraft or StarCraft 2.
Around the time that Blizzard announced the WCS plans was, as far as I could tell, around the time that most people found out that Star League was not happening. Obviously, some people on the inside knew for a few weeks before that, but it seemed to be that Blizzard and Split TV couldn't come to an agreement for a 2017 plan. And so I had already announced that, or it wasn't me, but it was already announced that Pearly was going away. and I had already announced kind of in a few videos, interviews, and streams and stuff that like I was moving away from StarCraft 2, so everyone got really worried, is Starleague going to go away? And at that time, even before the Blizzard announcement came out, the Blizzard announcement was kind of like what solidified it for me. I was like, well, this might just be, I may never cast StarCraft 2 again. I've lost most of my tournaments. I may, occasionally fill in for Tasteless and Artosis at the GSL, which I've done for several years. But I was like, well, this might just be it. It was really a sad time. Pro League going away was the saddest time, but a few weeks afterwards, I was told by SC2 employees, like, hey, we're thinking about making a tournament anyways, another one. It's not going to be part of the normal WCS system necessarily. Are you interested in commentating it? And I was like, yeah, let me know if it happens. I was like, I don't know. Spoke TV had really made big leaps and bounds on their production throughout the year, especially in StarCraft 2. I was really sad that they lost it, but they were really focused on League of Legends. They got half of the LCK, the Korean tournament that runs out here for League of Legends. So I thought, oh, it'd be really surprising if SPO actually just made their kind of own version of Star League again. I was surprised to hear it, but I didn't really believe in it. And then a few weeks go by, and I was told, like, also we're thinking about doing Brood War. And I was like, oh, I heard the rumors about Brood War HT. Is that why you guys are interested? Like, no, it's on the rise in Korea. And that was around the time the ASL was starting up, etc., and it was getting more and more popular. And I was like, look, I'm interested. I've done a little bit of commentating of Brood War at Africa and StarCraft 2. I love it. Just let me know if it's really happening, and let me know at what at what length and how big of a tournament it's going to be, because I got schedule problems. I'm casting a lot of different games right now. And eventually, like, slowly over the course of several weeks, everything came to a whole. I figured out the format, which is complicated. That's another issue for another time, but talk about that when the tournament starts. I was like, wow, this works out for my schedule. Doesn't overlap with anything I'm doing. I'm going to be in the country during this time. And it's StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2, two of my favorite games. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to commentate that. So for a while there, myself and Brennan especially, right? Because Brennan's my co-commentator for Pro League and Star League. We were like, I don't know. Brendan was commentating League of Legends. I'm commentating Heroes and Overwatch. I was like, maybe that's just it for StarCraft 2 for us, and it was sad I never got to say goodbye, but just how it was. But now we've got this opportunity to cast it again, so I'm pretty excited.
So you talk a little bit about how SPO TV saw the rise of Brood War as an opportunity for them. What's your personal opinion on the StarCraft 2 and the Brood War scenes in Korea? Do you think that there's room for either or for both to grow further as the years go on?
I think there's a lot of similar, the Korean mindset about StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2 is very similar to the foreign mindset. Oftentimes you'll find arguments on the forums, the Korean forums as well, just like the Team Liquid arguments about multiple building selection, which game was better and which game was around longer. And you see a lot of like fighting about this, but you also see a lot of, just like in the Western scene as well, in Korea, people being like, we got to bring these together. StarCraft is StarCraft. It's not StarCraft 1, it's not StarCraft 2. It's just StarCraft. That's just what it is. We got to bring this together. So you have some tension between the fans, but the thing that brings most Korean fans together is the old players. That's why when Flash was playing StarCraft 1 at the ASL, but then also when he was playing at StarCraft 2, those were the days the most fans turned up because he's super famous, he's super popular. Same with Jaedong, Stork, big names like this. So these big players kind of carry the scene in terms of massive viewership. In the ESF days, against StarCraft 2 when GSTL was going on, before Caspa took interest in StarCraft 2, that was kind of a dark time, I feel, for StarCraft 2 in a lot of ways. In the West, it was massive. It was like StarCraft 2's golden era. A lot of people look back at that time as like, oh, okay, StarCraft 2 is doing incredibly well. It's amazing. Look at how many viewers we get. The GSL is super popular. It's one of the biggest esports tournaments. But in the Korean scene, people were still watching StarCraft 1, and they were watching those famous players. And then eventually you kind of hit this impasse where StarCraft 2 players got to be famous and known by the StarCraft 2 fans. And then the StarCraft 1 players that were really famous switched over to StarCraft 2, and you hit this like interconnection, which was like Pro League 2014, I think was the point where it all just kind of came to an head. Like, I know these guys from StarCraft 1, I know these guys from StarCraft 2. It's a really strong point for StarCraft 2 in general. I'm kind of going all over the place just giving the history of this, but I had to explain it a little bit to explain what I think about the future for StarCraft 2 and StarCraft 1 is the lack of teams is really worrisome in both StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2. Without a team to back you up, when you don't win a tournament, you don't get any money. You don't get that much exposure. So if you don't have a team league, then you, as an individual player, say you get beat by, you got an innovations group in the round of 16 of GSL, and you're like, oh, I just can't beat him. You know, it's innovation and stats in my group. I'm a top tier player, I'm really good. If I was in the other group, probably would have gotten out, but I'm in this unfortunate group of death. You lose there, small amount of prize money, small amount of WCS points, and then what? You wait for next season? Ooh, that's a long wait. And then so players retire, players disappear, and you have this small core base. And the older this core base gets, the more players are going to retire naturally or get forced to go to the military. I'm just talking about StarCraft 2 right now. Eventually, the player base thins out, and we have this sick core group of players, and those are the players that are famous, and those are going to be known. This really has a similar kind of interlapping to StarCraft 1 at its end. After Casper disappeared, there were a few tournaments. There were a lot of players that were famous, showed up for leagues and things like that. But the player base thinned because players who couldn't beat the top tier players who had sponsorship deals just kind of retired, or a lot of them moved into StarCraft 2. The problem with StarCraft in terms of player base is that it doesn't seem to be growing in terms of pro play. Yeah, there's a lot of people playing the game on the ladder all the time. I still play. I get games in 5 seconds. I click find match, boom, get them right away. But in terms of pro play, we're not seeing too many DRG-lings or speeds, to just name a few StarCraft 2 players. Like, that's all I can really name. There's like was on CJ Entis as a B teamer, a guy called Eagle. There's Nightmare. I'm just naming some of the amateur players that are kind of known but not really known. We need more players like that, I feel like, for the longevity of the game. And going into the revival of Brood War right now, how long can Flash keep playing? How long can he continue to be the best at the game? And when he decides to hang up the mouse, so to speak, who's going to take his place? If the B guy who is behind him, who's also older than him, is the guy who takes his place, the level of play declines. We need the new B teamers to rise up to be A teamers, to then rise up to be champions. There needs to be like a hierarchy. And if you're a young kid, say age 12 or 14, and you're really good at StarCraft, you play on the Fish server, and you took games off these pro players, you could have a reason to tell your mom, like, I want to be a pro gamer, I want to drop out of school. And if there's a team infrastructure there, and you've got big massive sponsors like SKT, KT, like Verizon and AT&T, Samsung, you're like, your mom's looking at, oh, he could be on TV, like, he is really good, he beat these guys, I'll let him go try out, we'll see how it goes. But if not, if you're really good at the game, maybe you try to go to a qualifier or something, you don't make it because you hit innovation in the qualifier because he's still around, you hit stats in the qualifier because he's still around, then you just kind of give up and the player base just doesn't increase. So what I'm worried about, StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2, but especially the Brood War Revival, is we need new players. There needs to be incentive for new players to play. And if you're never going to beat those guys in the qualifiers, maybe you're good enough to try out for a team, then you're on a team and you appear in a team league, you get to practice televised matches, you get to prove that you're good, you get to get notoriety, get famous, get a salary. And then other people watching are like, oh, I saw this guy, he came out of nowhere. I used to beat him on Fish. Now he's on, CJ Entis or whatever, new team that could potentially theoretically arise in the future is what I'm saying. It needs to happen. He's like, well, I could do that too. But I'm going to train really hard. I'm going to tell my mom I'm going to go try out, or I'm training because I want to try out for CJ. But there's no teams, and it's like every tournament is just a bunch of all-stars that everybody already knows, and they're all getting older. So the level of play is just overall eventually going to decline. People make arguments on both sides that Brood War in 2010 was stronger than it is now. Some people say now is the strongest it's ever been because people are coming back and they're training like crazy, like the top players are. But eventually, like, Flash just can't be the champion forever. He's not going to be sitting in the chair 32, 35 after he comes back from the military being the best player in the world, and all the top 8 that you see in almost every tournament, they can't do it forever. So someone has to take their place. And I think that the game, both of them, but especially Brood War, which because it's on the rise again right now, both games need an amateur scene. There needs to be something that the players can do to get money or to get recognized or to prove to their parents or even motivate themselves to play this game instead of playing League of Legends or Overwatch. if they want to be pro gamers. So the amateur scene is super lagging right now. I think that's what we need really, really badly. There needs to be some way, there needs to be some team league, there needs to be something that gives incentive to players who can't always make the round of 16, have a reason to keep playing and get paid. Because when you're competing in a super competitive sphere in Korea, where the biggest game always gets the biggest leagues, the biggest sponsorship, the biggest money, and that right now is League of Legends, and then Overwatch is a quick second. Finding motivation can be very difficult. And people always say, like, look at the tournaments we have. Look at 2017. Look at IEM Poland stats. In that finals against TY, great series, amazing, really fun to watch, beautiful stage. StarCraft 2 is doing great. People say that, but is it going to be stats, innovation, TY, Maru? Like, are those people going to be around in 5 years? They're going to be winning everything in 5 years too, or are we going to have new players? If we don't have new players, I don't know if there's going to be tournaments in 5 years. That's my take on all of this.
So moving on from StarCraft, let's talk a little bit about your number 2 main squeeze, Heroes of the Storm. How did you get into Heroes? I know that you are on record, you practiced casting League for a period of time, but you never really went to camera with that. What drew you to Heroes of the Storm rather than like League or Dota?
Well, Dota, just to scratch that one off, is basically just never really big in Korea. There was a league called the KDL out here for a while, but that one never really took off. And as much as Dota is really cool and has a really awesome history, I figured there's just not much for me to do with it here. League of Legends was, and until very recently, continued to be for many years, exclusively an on-GameNet title. So, because I was working with Home TV, I was like, well, I don't think I can play, cast this game. Like Monte Cristo and Doe are doing it. There's not going to be any other leagues. It's probably just not for me, even though I really, really spent a lot of time practicing, getting ready to cast that game. It just never worked out. Heroes, nobody knew where it was going to go. I was working for SPO TV and Gom TV at the time before they became Africa. So I thought, well, no matter where it goes, like I'm going to be the guy in Korea who knows it. So myself and Brandon especially, we both played the game a ton. Moonglade as well, played the game a lot. And OGN had a tournament called Super League that was opening up after I'd played the game for about a year or so, if I remember correctly. Had a league opening up. Everyone who knew me in terms of commentators, which is everyone out here who speaks English, knew that this was the game I was really focusing on because I was hoping it was going to take off, and I really enjoyed the game a lot. It was a game I felt like some passion for, next to StarCraft. And so I was like, well, I want to have a second title. I want this to be my second title. Ended up casting Super League. Found out casting MOBAs is really hard. And it wasn't an easy road to get into learning how to cast that game properly, learning what's important, what matters. But I kind of started out just jumping on the boat when OGN called me because they were like, I heard you really like this game. You really want to cast it. You want to give it a shot with Moonglade? And I was like, sure. Jumped in right there, cast the first season, ended up casting the next season with Artosis and all following seasons until this season. I'm now casting it with G-Clef. I've traveled around a lot casting Heroes of the Storm. It's definitely been, I'd say, hard to get the respect of some of the Heroes of the Storm fans because it's not my only game, and almost everyone else who commentates it, it's like their game. And I think a lot of people look at me and say like, oh, he's just doing it for the money, or he just, it's only a side gig. But I really love Heroes a lot, and I always have. And now that I've gotten opportunities to do international events and work with all the commentators, they're all great people. They will help me a lot in terms of improving. I think my Heroes commentary is really good right now. And that's basically my story. I know you asked me just like how I got into it, but it's been a game I've always liked to play, and OGN's the only thing going on out here for that, and it's the best Heroes tournament that existed for a long time in terms of production, because everything else was just like weekend tournaments, and OGN had a tournament that was a regular league, just like the GSL or the SSL or LCK. So I was really lucky in where I was globally at the time when I was casting Heroes, because a lot of people turned their attention to Korea because they're the best players, and it was the best tournament.
You spoke kind of briefly there, talking about the respect from the fans. In your career, you've been criticized by a number of people at different points. I mean, you for a time you were a very controversial person in the StarCraft scene with a lot of people who loved your work and a lot of people who really didn't like your work. How do you deal with that kind of criticism for your work, and how do you kind of filter out the negative attention and kind of work with it in your life?
It's everyone's gut reaction as a commentator too. After you had a great day, open up Reddit or Team Liquid or whatever forum you're using for whatever game you're casting, and see like, what do people think about the games? It was a great day. I really enjoyed it. Like I killed it. Say I'm casting with Brendan. We're having a beer after the cast, and I like pound it with him, and I'm like, man, we like had some great commentary tonight. I really liked what you said about that. And then he's like, yeah, I liked what you said about that. And I was like, oh, we built this storyline that we planned. We had this idea. It really worked out. The games were great. And you like go check Reddit because you're like, I bet everyone loved those games. And it's like, does anyone else hate Wolf when he does this thing? And it's like on the top of Reddit, or like, does anyone else this? And you're like, oh, I had like the greatest day ever. I thought, but like, a lot of people are like, yeah, I noticed today he did this thing 3 times and I don't really like it, whatever. It's something that every commentator has to deal with in every game and every title. You just, you see them, and the longer you work in industry, you realize that that kind of feedback can be valuable, especially if it's really consistent. But overall, talk to whoever I'm commentating with, and people watch my show. Commentators out here, almost everybody watches all the esports out here, especially the OGN guys and me and Brendan. Like, Brendan watches LCK on OGN and casts it at SPO, so he watches both League of Legends tournaments, or he casts the other one. And then the casters at OGN watch what I do on Heroes, for example, and Brendan watches some of that. We all just talk, like, when something like this happens or people are angry about commentary, like, hey, did you catch those games? Do you think I was doing this, or what do you think about that? And I'm like, no, I don't really think that the comments that you saw on Reddit were really valuable. Or someone will literally like look at a thread and say, what is this is the second time someone brought this up. Do I need to change something? But generally speaking, we just kind of improve and talk to each other, whether it's a Reddit thread or not. Sometimes you got to take somebody aside and say, like, you're repeating this phrase a lot, you got to stop that. Or you made this comparison that I think is like not right to do, or you mentioned this, like, you went in like a kind of a no area for like what you were saying about this. I don't think you should do that. We have a lot of discussions like that. But in terms of when people just downright shit on you on the internet and they go all out on you, sometimes you gotta like read it and go, you know what? He's right. Actually, I did mess that up. I gotta work on that. And sometimes you just right click on the guy on like Reddit enhancement suite and tag him as something like, this guy always hates me. So the next time you see his comment, you're like, oh, this guy just doesn't like me. Because as it turns out, in the world, not everybody's liked by everybody, especially people who are on, basically internet television. If everybody liked me, I'd just be the most famous commentator in the world, and I'd travel everything, I'd cast every game. But not everybody likes me, and I'm not the best, and I'm not perfect. But when I read comments, I like to see how often I've heard that feedback. More times I've heard something that people don't like something that I've been criticized forever is, oh, Wolf criticizes the players a lot. If I hear it a lot, it makes me think like, well, this is something I really need to think about. Like, am I being too critical? Am I pushing the envelope too far on what I'm saying about players to make mistakes? I actually think about it, If it's something like, I don't know, Wolf always says this or that, or says players. One thing people is like a joke on the internet about me is always says players are on tilt. He can't really know that, You can't know if he's really frustrated or not. The guy doesn't seem to have much of an expression. And I'm like, well, I mean, I saw him off camera. I saw him, on camera. I know the player personally. I could tell he's frustrated. I'm going to say he's frustrated. That's how I feel about that. And I see that, every now and then as like a joke. And sometimes I see that like, Wolf says he's on tilt again. I'm like, oh, this guy just knows the joke. Like, he's not actually mad. There's all sorts of different things you can see in a Reddit thread, from people defending you against people who dislike you to, people saying outrageously positive things about a broadcast where I'm like, well, actually, like, I might have even been a little bit off there. Most people watching don't have broadcast experience, and they know less about the game than any play-by-play commentator even. Generally speaking, they're just fans that like the players and like the game. But feedback is valuable. You just got to know which ones to look at and say like, oh yeah, let me write that one down. Which ones to just go, okay, I just hide that comment, like move on with my life.
Pulling it back to Heroes of the Storm just a little bit, what's your opinion on the state of the game right now? Currently, as of last night at least, there was a big post on our Heroes of the Storm talking about how people believe that the game is going in a poor direction with the way that the talents work in the game. What are your thoughts on the actual gameplay of Heroes right now?
I have a like, it's a tough question to answer, but I think that a lot of the direction the balance team is making right now, and the design team is making right now, I think is really cool. Like I like big changes, and I like them making changes quickly. In the past, we had changes like tested for weeks and then just reverted, or a lot of discussion about a change for a big problem, or a nerf or a buff. And now, if a new patch comes out for 2 days and everyone knows really quickly and is really adamant that this is too strong, they will just patch it in the middle of the week and fix it, and push it in. So I feel like the direction that the team is taking right now in terms of quick changes and quick fixes is super awesome. Some stuff I don't like right now about talents is I think a lot of challenge are reworked too often. I think a lot of heroes are reworked too often, and sometimes it changes the core about who they are. Um, right now, for example, Tyrael is considered to be like a bruiser, tank, support. Like he does kind of all three, but mostly towards the tanking and the supporting. He has a heroic called Sanctification that makes everyone invulnerable. But they recently just, if I'm not mistaken, this came out like last night. Super reduced his health when they gave him like base spell armor, and so a lot of people are really upset about that because they think, okay, well that wasn't who he was before. Why does he have to be a spell tank now? That like really hurts his utility in other areas, and it makes him a specialist. But it makes him specialize in one area, but it makes him less of an all-around good pick. Why do they have to do that? This is a hero I really like, and I played him in a lot of different comps, and I thought he was really fun. And now I can only play him in certain compositions. I kind of hear the community on that one. I feel like there's a lot of heroes that kind of get pushed into a direction. And New Brock feels the same way, like becomes kind of like forced into a spell tank type hero. And I feel like what I'd rather see if Blizzard wants to push roles like that, like I want this player to be like an anti-mage type, hero. I wish they would just create a hero that fits their lore or whatever later down the road that fit that gap instead of changing existing heroes. There's just like a lot of reworks that happen that I just don't feel like are always necessary. In terms of talents, the things that drive me the most crazy as a commentator is when talents, especially talents that exist for a lot of different heroes, like let's just say a generic one like Giant Killer, is given, a bunch of different heroes have it. A talent like this, a generic talent like Block, other talent that everyone has. Then they remove it a lot of heroes and give them something similar, but it's a little bit more unique to them. Because I feel like as a commentator, I'm like, oh, he's basically Block, but it's like not really Block. It's like a little bit stronger, or it's a little bit weaker, but this character naturally has some passive that makes it so they can't have this. I'm being really vague. I'm not listing specific talents, but when they remove like a generic talent and make a specific one for that hero, as a commentator, it's frustrating to me because I'm trying to remember all these talents, and this one's basically the same as it was before, but now it's on a different tier, and it's not quite the same. It doesn't have the same icon, and I know a lot of people are saying like, oh, get good, learn all the talents, but I think for esports, it's really bad too. Because if I eventually, as an new esports fan, learn what Block means, and then I learn that icon, and I know that most warriors have it, and a few unique heroes have Block at level 1, and it's weird that they have it, but I'm like kind of getting, when I see Block, I know what that means. But if then they make every player or every hero have like a different unique form of Block, then it becomes a little bit more confusing, less easy to get into. And I think getting into heroes right now is super important because they launched a big HGC league this year. I think we need to get all the new players that we can get. And a lot of the changes they're making right now are pretty overwhelming to esports fans, like the base armor, the spell armor, the physical armor. I think they're all really good changes. They're really smart, but they're happening, and I think they're trying to trickle them in, so it's not insanely overwhelming, but it's happening so quickly that I feel like a lot of people are like getting a little bit turned off, getting a little bit confused. Their heroes are getting reworked in such a way where they're, like Tyrael, for example, kind of becoming an anti-mage. I don't know if these changes are all going to stay or anything like that, but that was a hot topic that people were talking about on Reddit. I think that like quick balance, like the game is balanced, and I think that if it's not, they're making quick changes to fix that, and I think that's really important. But in terms of design, my big, fear is just the constant reworking and the changing of talents and abilities to maybe make heroes feel cooler or unique. Like maybe if you want this different type of spell damage buff that everyone else had, but it's a cool name because you like this hero and it makes you feel like you're more playing Sylvanas or whatever. Sylvanas doesn't have an ability like this. I'm just throwing random generic names out right now. If you want to have that, then I understand why. I understand why the players, especially hardcore fans, are like, yeah, I'm a big Vol player and I want to feel more like Vol. I don't want to have this generic talent that other heroes have. I get why they do that, but I think for esports, it makes things a lot more difficult to follow. If you look at a game like League of Legends or Dota, for example, I know that they have an item system that's not quite the same, but when you see Doran's Blade, you know what that means every time, no matter what, no matter who's wearing it, with some exceptions with heroes having certain passives, right? But every hero has so many different talents and so many different tiers. It can get confusing when they add more and rework heroes nonstop. If you're an esports fan, because I feel like a lot of esports fans, around the world and a lot of different esports titles don't even really play the game; they only watch it. If you watched heroes for a while, like say in 2015, then you come back in 2017, you're like, oh, there's Katowice's going on. I want to check this out. You look and you're like, I don't even know what's going on anymore. I've never seen any of these talents. All the logos are different and stuff like that. So, look, I think the game is going in a good place or going in a good direction. I think the balance is incredible, and the changes to make sure that the game is balanced are really fast. But that's just my take on the reworks. I'd like to see like more heroes introduced to full certain roles rather than heroes being reworked or kind of forced down a path.
So you mentioned very briefly HGC, talking about kind of the bigger picture there with HGC also in mind. What are your thoughts on the current state of Heroes esports in Korea? Is that something that you can see growing as time goes on, or what are your general thoughts and expectancies for that game?
Heroes in Korea is, I feel like since the relaunch of Heroes, if you will, the Heroes Defy kind of ad campaign and this idea of like we've relaunched the game, we have bans now, we've got this new draft system, we've got this new esport. Like it wasn't like an official relaunch, but it really feels like Blizzard slammed in on the advertising. They're putting a lot more effort into getting it out there. I will be totally honest, like my queue times have massively been reduced. Like, I get games a lot faster. It feels like a lot more people play the game in Korea than did before. I can't speak for NA and EU because I just don't play on those servers, but there's definitely a larger player base. I see like a lot more new players, which is frustrating signs. There's some toxicity on those players that like come from other games, and people argue with each other like, go back to LOL and stuff like that. But as much as people like get angry about that toxicity, I'm like, no, that's good. Like, don't tell them to go back to LOL. We need these people. And the game is growing slowly, but I feel like this year, especially that big new launch, if you will, the unofficial relaunch was really big in Korea. Korea has the champions. Every player has ever won an OGN team, or every team that's ever won an OGN tournament has then gone on to win the global championship that happened afterwards. And we've had almost every tournament that's had two Korean teams in it, be it Korea versus Korea finals, BlizzCon being the only exception, with Fnatic actually defeating MVP Black, which was a huge upset. But people look to Korea as this is the best region, and Koreans are proud of that. So I think that that itself kind of helps the game grow. In terms of esports, though, we lost Super League, and because Blizzard wanted to move all regions into a unified format, which I totally understand. That's how just kind of international tournaments normally work. You don't just see the guy who wins a tournament when the rest of the world had to go through a league format. It's a little bit more complicated and honestly more legit than the tournament we had before. The downside of losing Super League was that we lost a big, great tournament that happened in OGN's main studio, the same studio that has League of Legends and Overwatch in it, the two huge games in Korea. So we kind of lost that. But what we gained was this tournament that really determines who's the best. When you have a round robin, it's way better than just, I had a bad best of 5 that day. I dropped down a loser's bracket. Then the next week we're feeling bad because we lost, and then we lost 2 best of 5s, and that's it. That's not how HGC works. you have to be good all the time. You have to be consistent throughout a long period of time in order to make it to these clashes. And the Korean one's called the Eastern Clash. So you got to be on the money all the time. And if you're the best of the best, it's really going to show. And that's what's really cool about the new format. It's just a better format overall. We lost the big stage. I know the tournament's being held online now instead of being broadcast on television. But what we gained was a better tournament overall. But the things that the Korean fans are really upset about is just, I'm not on TV anymore. I want to be a Heroes Pro gamer. And this sounds silly, especially probably to everyone watching, because I know the vast majority of people, I'd say, watching this don't even have cable TV at home anymore. Like, you're esports fans. You're watching this, you probably don't watch much television. You probably watch a lot of esports. You watch a lot of Twitch streams. For Koreans who are trying to be pro gamers and dropping out of school, because you guys have seen that these guys are really young. They're much younger than the Western players in most cases. Some of them are like 15, 16 when they're starting. These guys got to tell mom why they don't want to go to school or why they don't want to go to college. And if mom sees you're really good and she saw you playing with the pro gamers and you got team offers, if you're about to go on TV, like, mom's older, that means a lot more to mom or grandma. Like, grandma can see me on the TV, like, that's a big deal. To just be online is just not as cool to families. I think it's not a big of a deal, which really hurts the scene. And I like to talk about this a lot. That's why I mentioned earlier with the StarCraft stuff, is like, if you're an aspiring pro gamer, you got to look at, like, where's the highest you can go. That's what you really want to shoot for. But what if you're just mid-tier, and what does that mean? And for Heroes, if you're top, then you're traveling around the world. I'm just going to be proud going to BlizzCon. If you're in the middle, on the online tournament, there's no fans in the studio. Yeah, people are going to watch for you. Thousands of people are actually going to watch you online. But it's just not quite the same. So for the future of Heroes, I hope that it grows big enough to be that our round-robin system, the HGC that we have, is actually in the live studio, just like League of Legends or Overwatch or StarCraft, StarCraft in live studios all around the city. I hope that it gets big enough to be like that. There's no way I can know, but I do know, and I can tell you that there seems to be pretty big player growth and viewership growth on the Korean side as well. And viewership for the English side has been massive as well, because it's now an official Blizzard League. It's not just an OGN tournament. So we're on the Blizz Heroes channel. A lot of people tune in who never even knew that there was a Korean league at all. And for that side of things, it's really great. A lot more people finally know about these players that never knew about them before, only knew about them when they were at the international tournaments. So a lot more exposure for the players. I feel like it's tougher to get into it as a pro gamer because, like I said, you got to convince mom, like, why are you committing so much to this? And otherwise, if that doesn't happen, then everyone who's a pro gamer just lives at home and there's not a good training atmosphere and the level of play goes down, and then Korea isn't as dominant as they are now. So there's pros and cons. We lost champions as well, because the round robin system leads you into the clash, which then you become kind of a semi-global champion. For Korea, you fight against China. For NA, you fight against the EU league. So, if you get top 3, you go to China to play in the Eastern Clash, but you don't get to hold an OGN trophy on stage. So that's missing as well, but you get to do that in an international stage. So I think the future is really unknown, and it's hard to say whether this is good or bad for Korean Heroes, but it's just how it is. So I've been enjoying it so far. I like the new format, and hoping for the best.
So let's talk about the number 3 game for you, Overwatch. You've been getting into casting it a little bit in recent history. What drew you to Overwatch? What made that an appealing esports title for you?
Honestly, I really enjoyed playing the game a lot. And when me and Brandon Valdez first got into the beta, he and I duo-queued like crazy. We played a lot, and I was like, I think this game's going to take off here. At the time, the beta was, just NA only. And it was like super, super closed beta, right? So very few Koreans had it, and a lot of them were just watching on Twitch or whatever, checking out the game. We were like, this game's going to explode out here. I have a big feeling this game's going to take off. And when it did, and it came out, Monte Cristo and Doa had already had in their contracts that they were going to be casting the league, the OGN's Premier League for that. And that's public. They've said that several times. It's kind of how they got into casting it. And for me, I was like, well, I want to do the Code A or whatever. I want to try casting this game. Really excited about doing that. And there's a lot of tournaments and stuff coming up in the future for Overwatch that a lot of people don't know about, and Blizzard has big plans, etc. But I know I'm going to be involved in a lot of those future plans. And so I've been practicing casting the game. I cast promotions with Achilles. I cast, I believe, 2 days of Apex when Monty was out. So I've cast the game a decent amount now, like 7 times or 8 times. It's really fun to cast. It's really, really hard to cast. It's like the hardest game I've ever cast. It's super fast. Everything happens really quickly. And once you get a feel for if you're training to cast Overwatch, you know what's important. But even sometimes seeing it while you're talking about it live becomes difficult until you actually get used to it. Once you get used to it, it's super fun to cast. There's action all the time. There's never a dull moment. There's never a moment to sit back and say, well, +2's on the way. StarCraft can be like that sometimes, where you kind of have to sit back and take a big picture look. Overwatch is really fast and it's really fun. I really enjoy the game. I think it's going to be huge globally for a while, and it's already really big in Korea. Passed League of Legends several times in PC Bong shares. Sorry if you can hear that dog barking. The dog in my house, as soon as he goes off. But yeah, I think the game is going to really do well, and I know I haven't cast it that much yet, but I will be casting it a lot in the future. And about tournaments I can't talk about right now, but it's tough to take on Heroes, StarCraft 2, StarCraft 1, and Overwatch, and there's a lot of responsibility with that. So it's something that I didn't take lightly when I decided I wanted to really get into it, but I've enjoyed it a lot so far. There's so many players. Every team has 6 players, so many teams, so many new players, so many new faces. It's the first time in a long time since Heroes came out, and a lot of Heroes players were known for other games before playing Heroes of the Storm anyways. This is the first time since I first moved to Korea where I look at casting new players and new faces I've never seen before, I've never heard of before. And I know the best ones I'm going to be casting for 2, 3, 4 years to come. And it feels exciting because that leads me to this feeling of I'm going to be casting these players and I'm going to have all these histories and all these stories to tell of them the same way I do StarCraft and Heroes casting. I'm all about storytelling, and sometimes I look too much into the past more than the present when it comes to results and things like that. But I think Overwatch can have a long history, and that's one of the big things that draws me to it.
Yesterday, the final foreign team was eliminated from Apex. Do you foresee a world where the Korean teams and the Korean players are as dominant in Overwatch as they are in StarCraft, StarCraft 2, Heroes of the Storm?
Yeah. Because even though Western teams have figured it out now and are starting to get coaches, starting to put team houses together, the dedication at this time to training like a Korean team, living together, look, it's hard to live with 5 other dudes. And maybe if you got subs like 6 or 7 other dudes and your manager, and say make rules like girlfriend can't come over during practice times, and you get to this super strict schedule. That's hard for Western players to do that. They don't have coaches or managers who've dealt with that for years to look back and say, this is how we're doing it. You want to be on our team, follow these rules. If you don't, sorry, you're not on our team. So there's no infrastructure for the Western teams to train like Korean teams. And while a lot of the Western pros did well in the beginning, I think the reason why is because they had experience playing FPS games that the Korean players did not. A lot of these players, not all of them, but a lot of the Korean players were starting from scratch with Overwatch. Their first big esport titles, their first big FPS. And they became the best over time now. It's taken some time. Not because they're naturally gifted or they eat kimchi a lot. Like, they just train harder than everybody else. It's no secret. And people always ask, will the Koreans be the best? And if the game is big and there's money on the line, and they've got training houses and they've got sponsors and they've got coaches, you can bet your ass they're going to be the best at it. And, a lot of people are like, oh, look, Envious won the first tournament. Then it means that Korean's not going to be the best. Unfortunately, it's not what it means. In Envious is an incredible team, trained in Korea, lived in Korea for a long time during that tournament to train in the same house, learned a lot, then went to win another tournament, MLG, off of that same practice with a new player, Mickey, joined in, who was part of the reason I feel that they defeated Afrika in that finals, was because he was really good on Diva in a meta where she just kind of popped in and just popped a Diva player into their roster that really definitely helped them win the finals, in my opinion. But the Korean teams, like, they've all got coaches, and a lot of the coaches are known. They have histories. Like the Luxury Watch coach is an ex-Heroes of the Storm coach and also an ex-Brood War player. Like, these are the kind of things that the West just doesn't have right now. There's two problems with the West. I know I've already gotten into one of them, the team house thing, living together. That's an issue. It's tough to get people to live together. But the second thing really is that they don't. It's hard to have a coach because no one really respects someone who's worse as a player than the players. Like, the players look at the coach and say, well, you're 3,000 MMR and I'm Grandmaster Pro Gamer who's won the last tournament. Why should I listen to you? And coaches can look at 6 players. This is the coach's job, right? So look at 6 players, deal with these personalities, get them on track, tell them what to practice, and also set up scrim blocks, and also talk about plays, because Overwatch kind of has plays. It's like football in that regard. You set up a play, you go for it. If it fails, you kind of assess your ults, and then you set up for another push. But it's tough to have someone who can think about all these things and be going through all this in his head, who's also just a pro gamer level, like, who could just be playing in the tournament. If he was good enough to play in a tournament, he'd probably just be on another team playing, right? So you have people trying to be coaches, they don't get the respect from the players. And this is not just in Overwatch. This has been going on for many years for many esports. I think League of Legends is the esport that's really picked up coaches in the West the best. And having respect for ex-pro gamers or players that were never pro gamers, or other coaches that were never pro gamers, just because they respect their knowledge of the game. Like Monte Cristo, for example, who coached League of Legends for a while on CLG, was never a pro gamer. Just watched the game a lot, analyzed the game a lot. That's what you got to do. I think that players need to learn to live together, train hard. Do they have to, like, live in the house 24/7 and never visit their families and never have a girlfriend? No, but they need to boot camp more regularly. They need to be together more regularly, and they need to respect people that analyze the game. And we need those analysts to rise up too, because, you know, right now people are just kind of looking at B-tier pro gamers, and those guys are trying to be coaches, but they don't really want to be a coach, and they're not really that good at coaching yet. These minds, these personalities need to be found. These coaching roles need to be found, and that's what the West needs. Coaches need to live together, need to practice harder, practicing together online all the time. Meet up for like 1 week boot camp before the tournament. Maybe it cuts it for you in Europe and in NA, but when you go against Korean teams later on internationally, who literally practiced together all year long as 6-man in the same house with a coach and a manager and like a cook. And then all they have to do is get on a plane and travel to that tournament and show up. They're going to win. Of course they're going to win. So, yeah, I mean, that's my take on that.
So like you alluded to earlier in the interview, and you did an interview with Esports where you alluded to this as well, but with Pro League gone and SSL gone, there was a point where you were looking at not being involved with StarCraft because it just wasn't possible, and Overwatch was going to be the next big thing for you, as I understand it. Is that still the case now that SSL is coming back? I mean, you're juggling Heroes and Overwatch and StarCraft 2. Is there a main game for you right now?
That's actually a really tough question. Honestly, I just can't lie. Like, I feel like of all the things that I've been able to do this year already, and the things I have planned to do this year, when you look at those 4 titles, Brood War, StarCraft 2, Overwatch, and Heroes, StarCraft 2 is the one I was most excited about. It may be somewhat because I knew, or I didn't know that it was going to happen, and I just kind of already resigned it in my head a little bit, and it was a sad moment where, like, I kind of just, like, said goodbye to, like, a nebulous thing, and so, like, goodbye StarCraft 2, I guess that's kind of it for me. I never really got to say goodbye to the community or anything, and I got tweets every day. I still get tweets every day, like, wow, why'd you quit? And I'm like, I didn't quit. My terminus just went away. I think StarCraft 2 is the game that has been the game I've been commentating the longest. I have a big draw towards it. The future for the other games is really exciting, especially Overwatch, right? Because and Brood War, like Heroes, I'm already casting for a while and it's not going anywhere. It's not new to me anymore. But like Overwatch and Brood War, I'm really excited to see where they're going to go, and I'm really hyped about that. When I say they're my main games, not yet. I don't know. I don't really have a main game. But when you look at the four, StarCraft 2 is the one I've been casting longest, and a lot of people just say that by default makes it my main game, right? And I'm really excited about it. I know the scene for the players the most. It's the game I know the most, the game I've commentated the most, and I'm super hyped for Star League to start again.
In April of 2013, you did a vlog where you talked about how Monte Cristo and Daw were being put in charge of casting a restream of WCS Korea, and you said that it's not usual for casters to have to work with more than one game at a time, and referenced the idea that that sort of thing will become more of an accepted practice in the future. 4 years later, it's widely accepted that casters, especially in the English language working in Korea, will work with more than one game. And I mean, going off the back of this year, you're going to be casting 4 titles, just in the coming months. You're someone who I really pen as someone who's successful casting more than one game. As a caster of multiple titles, what was it like to work through that transition in the industry where you went from doing just one game to working with as many games as you wanted?
First time you cast a game, a new game, is so hard. Uh, I remember the first time I cast Heroes, I had done so much preparation and so much work to get ready, played the game a ton, watched all the VODs of the foreign tournaments I could, which was at the time like mostly just watching Caldor cast online things that didn't even have big prize pools or anything like that. I'm like, well, this is what this is how the foreign casters are commentating this. That's what's going on. Learn how to do it. Show up, and you know so much about the game, right? And in my case, I did like a few practice casts, but practice casts always feel weird. You're never really in the zone because it's not real. Sit in the chair for the first time to cast a new game, and I always feel this a little bit nervous because you're like, I don't want to screw this up. I don't want to give a bad impression, but it is my first time. And after you cast for like 20 minutes, it just gets easier. But it takes like about, I'd say 2 months to really feel like, yeah, I think I'm doing the job that people could respect. Like for about 2 months there, you're kind of like, I know a lot about this game. I've been working really hard for this, but I could understand why I don't sound like a natural still, and why people will still look at me and go like, who's this guy? He must be new. And the more games you add in, the more difficult it becomes. And when you don't cast a game for a while, two different things can happen. Like, for example, when there's an off season for StarCraft and I don't cast for a while, when I come back, sometimes I have some of my best casts because I'm like really like I've been missing casting StarCraft. I'm super excited. Like there's so much tension, so much hype. Like the new season of Pro League is starting the opening day. Even if it's MVP versus Prime, I'm like, oh yeah, this is it. I'm in. I'm ready. Well, the opposite can happen though if you're right in a period of a lull time for a game while you're deep into another game, which is basically what's happened with me right now for casting Brood War that I did with Rapid last week, although I feel like I did fine. I was really focused on Heroes, been super focused on that, preparing for the upcoming Eastern Clash and all the Korea tournament I was doing, watching VODs, watching the EU versus NA, the Western Clash, and then going into cast Brood War. It's not like I had a bad cast or anything like that, but it just feels like those are the tough ones. Those are the ones where you're like, ooh, it's been a long time since I've cast Brood War, and I'm also super focused on this other thing right now. Whereas if you're doing both of them at the same time, your focus kind of is evenly split, and you don't end up, screwing up basically because you got your hands in everything, or you're like, your scale's kind of balanced, if that makes sense. Going into casting 4 games, I've never done anything like this. I've cast different titles in the past, like I've even cast Smash Bros. I've cast Street Fighter. I've cast just a crazy amount of times. I've cast. I did technically cast League of Legends. I had to do that for a weekend tournament in Korea. It was like a super low profile tournament, like only maybe 400 people watched, so it was not like the biggest League of Legends cast of my career or anything like that. But cast a lot of games, where I'm like casting StarCraft and Heroes, and I have to go do another thing that no one knows about because it's like not on Twitch and I don't promote it that much. I've done jobs, right? Everyone's done jobs. Off jobs. To have 4 really big games I'm commentating is going to be hard. There's almost never going to be a time though where I'm doing all four at the exact same time. That just wouldn't be possible. But even in how close proximity they are to each other, it's a challenge that like a lot of my peers have looked at me and said like, Wolfman, don't do this. It's going to be hard. And I feel like for StarCraft 1, or excuse me, StarCraft 2 and Heroes, the games are always changing, the meta is changing, especially in Heroes. You get patches every week. Um, it's there's a lot to know and there's a lot changing, there's a lot to follow. But those games are so familiar to me, and it's like riding a bicycle. Every time you sit down, you're like, okay, I know how this goes. As long as I'm doing my research and reading everything and watching all the VODs, I know what's up. But the challenging ones are Overwatch, which is super new. Not even anyone really knows that much about that game yet. No one's really familiar with casting that game yet. People are getting there, but it's new. And then Brood War is basically only there's like two Brood War commentators in the world, basically in terms of like casting regular leagues. It's Tasis and Artosis. You look back at the YouTube commentators like Klazart, Bulltrap, Nuke the Stars, and stuff like that. You can look back at those guys from the 2000s, and you could say like, oh, that was their casting style. But that was like before casting was a thing. That was before live stream was a thing. That was when casters would record this in their bedrooms and put it on YouTube after getting a Korean VOD, downloading that from somewhere. Brood War is really hard to learn how to cast properly because you have to know all of the history. And if you don't know the history, you've got to do a lot of research. And let's be real, even the Korean commentators don't know every player, remember exactly everything about them. They've got to do research. They've got to watch VODs. And then Overwatch, you just kind of got to go with the flow on that one. Like, the game is changing, the meta is changing. There's a lot of big patches all the time, and the scene is super new, so you have to follow it every step of the way. So those are the two hard ones of the four, and I'm putting everything I can into really focusing on them when it's time to cast them. And I think if you said you watched my Overwatch casting, you liked it, you probably noticed like the amount of effort I put into prep work for that. I prep for every cast I do, literally every single one, but the prep work that goes into an Overwatch cast versus the prep work that goes into a StarCraft 2 cast, it's much more extensive because the game is new for me, and I'm not even an A-tier caster, I would say, yet. I'm just too new. And casting four games, the games that are the hard ones, those are the ones I'm going to focus on most on improving. But it doesn't mean that I just wing it in StarCraft 2 or Heroes. And like I said, if ever, it may never even happen. I have to check my schedule again. There's never going to be a moment where I'm like, Monday I cast StarCraft 2, Tuesday I cast Overwatch, Wednesday I cast Heroes, and then Thursday I cast Brood War. That's just never really going to be happening. That would be insane and almost impossible to keep up with. But yeah, it's going to be tough. It's hard to transition. You have to really learn the ins and outs mechanically of the game itself. You have to get to know the players, get to know the pro gamers. I think it's actually fair to say that it's easiest to start casting a new game, when the game is new. That's what makes Brood War in a lot of ways harder than Overwatch for some people, because there's so much to know about Brood War that everyone who's been following the scene has known forever, and they think it's obvious, but for you it's like super complicated and you have to do so much research. That's why, for example, when SpoTV asked me if I was interested in casting League of Legends, I was like, whoa, LCK, that's a long history. I'm not going to touch this one for now, because I'm also doing a bunch of different other games. And this is before I was even knowing I was going to cast Heroes this year or Overwatch. I was just assuming I'd be casting StarCraft 2 and Brood War. I'm like, no. Not going to touch that one. That's got a really long history. Great commentators out here already. And learning a game again, because I did prepare to cast League of Legends, right? But that was several years, and I haven't really been preparing to cast it anymore. Preparing to cast a game that exists and has a long history and tons of items and patches, and like knowing like what the meta was 5 years ago, knowing what it is today, knowing all that stuff, being able to reference that's really hard. But if you're starting a new game from the ground floor, when the game is on its ground floor, it's hard for sure. But because no one really knows what they're doing and there's not that much to know yet, it's a lot easier.
So I take some fan questions. We're going to fit in as many as possible. The number one question that people asked, and so many people asked this question. I know a while ago you said that you were going to focus on tweeting and interacting on social media with your Korean fans in Korean. I know that you've streamed on Twitch in Korean for your Korean fans, and it seems to really like caught fire. Your tweets that you make in Korean with your pictures and stuff, they seem to go viral on a semi-regular basis. You were in the Korean Maxim magazine, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
What's on the go with all that, dude?
So when I was in China for the Gold Club World Championship for Heroes, I had this idea for a tweet because I knew that I had some Korean fans, like not a lot, but I had some on Twitter, and I knew that they really like to retweet my stuff when they thought it was really funny. Like, oh, like a Westerner would post this thing about Korea that's really funny. So I had a bunch of Korean food, like ramen packets and stuff. Like if you go to my Twitter, you see my pinned tweet. By the time this interview goes up, it's probably still my pinned tweet. I got a bunch of instant noodles and things like that in my hotel room. I had all those brought over to the hotel, and then I had my friend take a picture of me wearing like the hotel robes with all that stuff, being like, look, Chinese food's real great, but I just needed my Korean fix, so I ordered all this stuff to my hotel, and I can't wait to eat it, basically. It was like the idea behind that. That tweet blew up because I used the term Daehanmi국 Nom, and the Korean word for the Republic of Korea is Daehanminguk, and then Miguk is the word for America, and a Miguk Nom was just kind of like American fucker, or like Nom is a hard word to translate, but it's not a nice term, right? So I dubbed myself the Daehan Miguk instead of Minguk Nom, and people thought that was funny with the picture and everything else. So I continued to tweet in Korean because people really wanted that, and they were like, "Oh, he speaks Korean." You know that mostly esports people, right? That are Korean esports fans. Like, "Oh, I always saw that guy, at the studio, and he spoke English to his co-commentator, and they laughed a lot. Went backstage. I don't really know what he's like. I have I don't know anything about him. I don't speak English. I didn't even know he could speak Korean." So I kept tweeting in Korean, and it started to explode, and I just kept going with it. And I actually have in my Twitter analytics like way more interaction. And it's obvious if you look at my Twitter, my tweets in English get like way more less interaction than my Korean tweets. I get way more interaction from Korean fans. So I don't care about the Western fans anymore. I don't care about esports. But when I had a break, a bunch of downtime, there wasn't that much esports to tweet about. I started tweeting in Korean, and it blew up. And now I have way more interaction. So just to make sense from a Twitter perspective to grow my followers and stuff to tweet in Korean a lot. I think that I'll probably regain a lot more Western interaction once I start casting more regular leagues for the bigger games, especially the games I'm known for. Like when I cast in Heroes, I'm still kind of a newer face in Heroes. Not a lot of Heroes people use Twitter. So it's tough to like tweet my opinion out in the middle of the night also because of my time zone and stuff for people to even see that or care about it. StarCraft is starting up again. Really excited about that. And I've got a bunch of StarCraft fans that have been following me forever. So you're definitely going to see a lot more StarCraft tweets from me again in English. I know I made it my New Year's resolution is to tweet more in English, and like I haven't really followed through with it that much, but it's been a fun ride for me in Korea right now because I got basically a bunch of sponsorship stuff. I have 200 bottles of soju and unlimited ramen in my house that I have for the rest of my life because tweets I made. Like literally unlimited ramen in my house, unlimited soju, and I can just call somebody and get that sent to my house whenever I want because of some of the tweets I made. It's been really fun. As you mentioned, I was in Maxim magazine already. There's a bunch of different more magazine things I've done that are just scheduled for like spring or later on winter releases that haven't come out yet. Just a bunch of fun stuff because I got viral in Korea, and it's super fun. And I've been looking to make more content. I'm planning on. I know I've said this a million times, and I have some stuff on my YouTube already for it. Planning on making more YouTube video stuff in English so that people wonder what's Korea like. I can show them, videos of food and things like that, how you eat it, what people traditionally do with it. Just more like what's Korea like. Korean esports is big, so people want to know what my life and what the other English commentators' lives are like and what the players' lives might be like outside of the game. So that's something that I'm hoping to focus on going forward.
Kind of a follow-up, very briefly, would you ever consider casting in Korean for your Korean fans?
Casting is difficult in Korean because in Korean you have to use like all the proper honorifics. And so while I'm pretty fluent in Korean in terms of being able to speak quickly, but also speak the right politeness while, let's say, a battle is going on, It's quite difficult. With practice, it would definitely be possible, but that's something that I might consider in my life in like 5 or 10 years when my Korean is much better. It was very few, if you look at like English commentators, very few English commentators who are not native English speakers. Rotterdam is one in the StarCraft community who's like really, really improved his English and still has somewhat of an accent, but it's much better than before. Caldor, another one. Grubby, ex-pro gamer, now Here's the Storm commentator and streamer. English not his native language, but he's incredible at it. Has like a better vocabulary than anybody I know. It's tough though. Like there's very few of them, right? And some of them still get complaints about their accents all the time. Hell, Australian commentators sometimes get complaints about their accent. It's not from America, but people, they want to hear what they've heard before. So to be able to commentate naturally, my Korean would have to get to a level where I almost seem native, which I'm just not there yet. I know people always would like tell me that. Like that's what like when I go into restaurants, I'm like, oh, your pronunciation's really good. I'm like, yeah, but you're just saying that. Like I'm not actually perfect yet. So what I would rather do, especially on a more immediate scale, is, when you go to an event, you have someone like Smix, right, at the event. She translates what the players say, translates that to the fans, that kind of in between. That's something I'm much more interested in the more immediate future, like being a translator, not instead of a commentator, but like imagine, when you're commentating a player, instead of just like throwing the player over somewhere else where there's like a translator, I just get up and go interview the player right away, which I did at the Kespa Cup. If anyone watched that, I actually got to interview the players in Korean, and then like I or Brendan actually translated the questions and the answers back to the English fans. That was really fun. And Brendan speaks pretty good Korean too. We do a lot of translations when we have problems with tech, or sometimes we don't have translators on site for interviews. So sometimes we tell you guys, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're just translating on the fly because like literally something wrong is going on in our headsets because like the guy who's supposed to translate his mic didn't have batteries or something. We're like, oh, here we go. So, yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Shiftix asks, how different is the fan interaction between Korean and foreign esports scenes?
I'd say this is going to sound crazy, especially to like anyone who's been following esports since its beginning and like the forum culture and the internet culture. And what you think you see, the meanest comment you think you've seen on like Reddit or on Team Liquid or on like the Facebook site or whatever, or like Gosu Gamers, like what you think you've seen in the West, like the Korean fans are like insanely positive or insanely negative, like on a massive scale, like just in terms of difference. Like if a player messes up, there's like a thread. They don't really hate on commentators that much, although they do, but they hate on like, oh my God, Faker had a bad day. He's garbage. Like he should retire. And like people say like really mean things. I mean, I don't even want to say what people say, like how mean it is. So that's kind of like something I've always noticed about the Korean community, especially once I started to learn Korean and go to the forums. Like, oh man, people are mean, but it's funny. Imagine like when you go to a Reddit thread, not even an esports Reddit thread, but like even a politics Reddit thread, like the top comments like something kind of fucked up, but you kind of laugh at it. Like that's kind of like the Korean mentality for posting, is like, oh, it's like really messed up, dude, but like I see what you mean. You see a lot of that stuff. But look, I mean, in terms of like fan interaction, directly, not like the anonymous, I thought Faker had his worst day ever, or like his stats should even still be on KT roster, that kind of thing that you see every now and then. I think like fan interaction in person, Korean fans are really polite. They usually will, like, if they really want to take a picture with you, they'll never ask unless they gave you a gift or something. Like they'll bring you like a soda or coffee, and if you accept it, then they'll ask you to sign. Kind of stuff. Like fans are really nice like that. They do the same to the Korean commentators, obviously. Their fans are really, really energized, and I know Western fans are too, but I see the Korean fans more often, and they cheer, they scream, they get loud, they show up in droves. There's like a famous GIF out there where Rain, the StarCraft 2 player at the time, he's went back and forth, StarCraft 1, StarCraft 2, back to StarCraft 1 now, wins his Pro League match, and he high fives a bunch of girls' hands down the row, like the front row of the studio. And when he gets the last one, and he high fives her hand, she like jumps up and like freaks out because she's like, oh my God, he touched me, and esports out here is kind of like that. Everyone's a celebrity. and everyone's super super duper famous. Because esports happens here like on the reg. It's not I am every few weeks we've got some tournament somewhere on the weekend and we're all just going to tune in and watch it. And if I can, hopefully I have enough money to go there. In Korea, if you're a fan of these players, you can go there anytime you want. You can be hardcore. You can show up to every match. You can bake the guy a cake, and you're going to be able to find them, and you're going to be able to give it to him if you want to. Because it's huge, but it's smaller. The round of 8 match of the GSL is not the same stage that Stats and TY played the finals of IEM on. It's not the same thing, but you can see these players more often, so you see a lot more fan interaction on the personal level because these tournaments are regular. And sometimes I'll see a girl or a guy or a group of friends, like a group of like 5 or 6 people, go to every match because they're just that hardcore, and they've always got gifts of the players or the casters, or they're just shy and they take pictures. There's a lot of girls who like to take pictures of the players and upload them on Twitter. I follow all these people because I get great photos of the players. They just show up for a match and they just like taking photos of their emotional moments. Like say like Björn's emotional moment at the last IEM. So fans are, I'd say like in Korea, they're more intense than Western fans on all aspects, whether they're happy, angry, passionate, loud. Yeah.
Back in 91 asks, here's the Storm question. Which type of metagame do you prefer watching casting, sustain or burst?
That's actually a good question. I think, that's a really good question. I think there's pros and cons to both. I think sustain is it ends up having like the players are playing more skillfully in a sustain type like team fight, where the team fight goes longer. There's a lot more to think about. There's a lot more small actions that get made that decide the team fight. Whereas burst can be as simple as, I was in the bush and his check skill was on cooldown. I caught him and I blew him up and I won. In terms of like, just team fights, right? And then if you're talking about the metas, I feel like we've moved pretty far away from the burst meta in general right now. And we're kind of in a stun meta that can be bursty, but it's more like burst stuns that lead to picks. I'm not really answering the question, but like, I think that the burst is more exciting to cast. Like it's, oh my god, he blew him up, and you talk about like he got caught by the Rain of Vengeance right around the corner, and then he's stunned again, and he got hit by X ultimate, and boom, he's dead. That's super exciting to cast, super fun. But in terms of like watching raw skill and really breaking down a fight and getting really hyped and fights getting turned around, there's some level of fun to that longer fight, the sustained fight as well.
After 6 years of working in Korea with esports, do you see any point now where you would ever leave Korea and like head back to Atlanta?
Well, never back to Atlanta, I hope. I don't really mean to speak badly of my hometown. I actually really like Atlanta, but there's not much of a future in esports in Atlanta, at least right now, for me. So I hope if I go back to Atlanta for like doing other work, if that's what the question implies, I hope that never happens. I never want to do that. I make good money with what I'm doing now, and even if I made twice as much money going back to do something else, it wouldn't be worth it to me because that's not where my passion is. And similarly, if I had an opportunity to work overseas in esports for more money or, more viewership, because let's be real, like, even though I'm casting esports at primetime in Korea is not primetime in the West, and even if the players are the best, the viewership's always going to be better overseas for an English international broadcast. To me, right now, with what I'm doing in casting is like, it's not about being famous. It's not about making big money. I just really like casting the Korean players. I like casting the best in the world. I like the production that we have here right now. And so right now, no, I can't see myself leaving Korea. I really would never want to. Not even just because of the job that I mentioned, but I love living here. I've got a lot of friends here. I feel like I spent my entire adult life here. I was 20 when I left the States, and I'm 26 now. So it feels like just obvious that I would continue to stay here. If a huge opportunity arises, it's going to have to be esports related. It's going to get me to leave. And even then, oh man, it'd have to be like the biggest opportunity of all time. And as it just is right now, like I just love everything about working and living here. Something as as simple as um, being able to leave my house at 3 a.m. with a friend and go get food at like a normal restaurant just because it's open at 3 a.m. because that's just how things work here. We'll just never be able to have that in LA or Atlanta, maybe in New York. But how safe it is on top of all that, how the companies I work with have been working in esports for so many years longer than any place I could ever work overseas. Just hard to imagine, man. I just don't see it happening. But anyway, things could change. Someone's going to reference this interview in 4 years. Someone will be like, well, things changed, but right now, no way.
So, what kind of advice would you give to people in esports on the up and coming path, maybe who want to replicate your success, want to go to Korea, work with esports? What kind of advice do you have for those people?
People always say there's an old boys club, and while there is definitely some truth to the fact that people who work in the industry have networking connections and do protect each other and do get the job first before newer casters and newer people who want to work in esports. When I started casting the game, or StarCraft 2, when I started casting in general, there was an old boys club already, so to speak. It doesn't matter if you think that you got blocked from a job, because this is what I hear the most, right? People complaining like, oh, they cut me out, they blocked the job, like this guy got the job because he knows people. Same sort of stuff you hear in the regular entertainment industry outside of esports. If you feel that way, it means you're not working hard enough. It means you're not making enough content. It means that you're not pushing yourself to the limits. And then people always say, well, I'm in school, so it's tough. And I'm like, I dropped out of school to come out here. You have to put in the time, and if it doesn't work again, you have to ready to, or if it doesn't work the first time, you have to be ready to do it again. And if you fail the second time, you have to be ready to do it again. If you fail the third time, you have to be ready to do it again. And you have to just tirelessly work at it because it's really hard to break in. Very few people just get lucky. It happens, sure, but most people, almost every person who works out here, especially in Korea, spent a lot of time behind the scenes working in esports, whether it was casting, interviewing, making YouTube content. Um, like a lot of people don't know about Taste and Artosis. Not only were they, ex-pro gamers in WCG, but Tasis worked at GOM TV before casting StarCraft 2 for a long time. Knew the players, lived out here, talked to them. Artosis was on a YouTube channel called SC for All, made a ton of content. Went to like every Courage tournament, took videos, talked to players, did like news report-esque type stuff on a YouTube channel before he became a commentator for StarCraft 2. I mean, he did start commentate StarCraft 1 as well, but like, it was people that just come out of nowhere. They weren't just the only two guys in Korea who were just like, yo, we can commentate the game, and then they got famous. Like, they put time in, they put work in. I put work in. Monte Cristo, Dilla, the next two big, I would say, like that came out after myself, Taste and Artosis. We all put a lot of time and a lot of effort into making our own content. If you feel like giving up, then like maybe it's not for you, is what I would say. Just keep putting yourself out there, keep working, and when that there's like some new tournament coming up, even if it's just an amateur tournament, it's not like it can I get that many views. If you want to be a caster, for example, just do it and do it for free and hone your craft and get better, and then keep asking for more and more gigs. Try to raise yourself up. Keep trying to put yourself into the place to succeed. Or when you get to like the mid-tier one, or maybe you're about to get paid or something, they're like, who are you? You're like, well, check out all my VODs. I've done all this stuff. I've got a resume now. And just build a list of experience. It's going to make you improve, and it's going to show to other people who don't know who you are, who might work with you, what you've done and why they should work with you. This is a bit of like a long-winded answer, and this doesn't apply to just casting, but if you're trying to get into esports and you feel like you're stopped or you're stumped, then just work harder.
Unfortunately, we're at the end of our rope now. Time has expired. Are there any shoutouts that you want to make, or any final comments that you have?
And basically, honestly, just in terms of shout outs, you guys can all follow me on my Instagram, my Twitter, Facebook, etc., which I think are probably on overlays or something. But um, this on like a personal note, as a commentator has worked for several years out here and kind of been in people's favor and not in people's favor at different times. I do just kind of want to say like thanks for everyone who's ever said anything about me on the internet, whether it was positive or negative, because um, as frustrating as it could be at times, like it's good to get your voice out there and just know that like when you guys are frustrated with me and collectively whatever game you're in, or like maybe it's just on one day and like I messed up that day, thanks for keeping me in check, if that makes sense. I listen to everything you guys say, I read it, or I have someone read it to me. I just know what you guys are feeling about my commentary at different times. And maybe if you guys never said anything to me about it, I'd be a worse commentator today. So I know I've kind of always been at odds with the community sometimes, and I've been really aggressive, but this is the time when I step back and say, like, you know what, thanks, guys, anyways, for telling me how you feel. Because at the end of the day, it's my show that I'm on, and I'm the voice of it, but the show belongs to you too, because you're the one who's watching it. So thanks for all the feedback over the years, and glad I'll be back commentating StarCraft for, I think most people watching probably know me for, and I'll see you guys then.